This is Clip Brane. Recently, I sat down at the Performing Arts Center at Oak Mountain High School and talked with Jim Duren. We went through his background from his beginnings in band in high school and how that influenced his interest in majoring in music at the University of Alabama, and then some of the stops during his long and very successful career in music that ended up at Oak Mountain and in his retirement in 2012. I think it was a fascinating conversation. I hope you enjoy listening to it. You know, this is a stage that you've been on many times before, and I think valid arguments could be said that somehow you've managed to coax some of the best music out of high school students that high school students can play. And I just wondered, in this room, is there any particular night or any particular performance that you remember that stood out among all the others?
Well, not particularly. I think as the program has grown, the performances, of course, started out on a high level. I think they've gotten better every year that we've been here. The thing I can remember that's humorous to me, which will have nothing to do with the proficiency of the band, was the first year we were here. We had the wind ensemble out here getting ready to play the Brother Memorial Night. I had to go backstage for something. As I walk backstage, I hear, believe it or not, about 4 of my trombone players playing Go Big Blue. Now, obviously, I wasn't real pleased with that, but it does stick out in my mind.
Well, I mean, I know it'd be hard to pick out a favorite band or a favorite person within a band, but in a broader picture, maybe beyond the stage here, do you remember any particular performance that you thought was outstanding?
Well, once again, the performances I think have gotten better as the years go by, and it's really hard to pick out one in particular over the other one. I would have to say this past spring, the final MPA concert for me was a very emotional time, and I think I'll probably always remember that one.
Was there any particular thought given to the music and this being the final performance? Did you pick any music that was any different for that performance?
Not necessarily. Well, I guess probably I did. I wanted to pick things that from my past I thought that I enjoyed a lot, that I wanted to do again, things that the kids had enjoyed playing. So we went with that, and those were the reasons for picking the things that we were doing. Plus, they fit the band very well as well.
Talking about fitting the band, one thing I've noticed in listening to your bands over the years is that you will have a particular piece selected in concert band that really fits a particular player who happens to be outstanding on this instrument or that instrument. You do put, I guess you must put a lot of thought into that.
Yeah, I do. I want to make sure, because going in your players and what you have and how far they progress. And sometimes you pick a piece that features a particular section or player because you want them to develop. They're at a certain level and you want to take them to another level. So, yeah, there's a lot of thought taken in when I do that and planning what we're going to play. Always have in mind where we are and what we're trying to accomplish.
Well, some of those soloists, I remember hearing a story once of one young lady in the woodwinds that, just spent innumerable hours practicing a solo. Is that common, you think, among your players, where they would really put in a lot of extra effort to make sure they shine?
Yeah, I think that's probably the difference between us and a lot of other groups. I think the kids understand the amount of time it takes to do the kind of literature that we do. There's only so much you can do in your practice time, rehearsal time every day. There's a huge responsibility outside of that. And once they buy into the idea that they've got to practice and they're preparing for that, just like they would a history test, that kind of thing, then you start making all kinds of new moves, and the players keep getting better and better and better.
Well, when I've gone to some of the assessments, I've noticed the letter codes that are associated with particular pieces or a particular band that's playing different groups of music. Could you explain those some? What do those mean?
You mean like
the A's?
Like A, double A, B? Yeah. It's the classification. It's all based on the enrollment of the high school, not the size of the band, but the enrollment of the high school. Like double A, which is where we are, is 1,200 students and above. A is somewhere around, I think it's like want to say 900 to 1,100 students, somewhere around there. And then as the student bodies in the schools decrease, then that level goes lower down to double B and B and on so on down the line.
Well, how about the difficulty of the music? Is it college level music? Some of this, I've heard some of these pieces that your band have played in college windows.
Right. Yeah, we usually play grades 5 and 6 with a heavy dose of grade 6, which is the graded music. That's the highest level that there is available to play. And we've always done that. We have kind of a pride in the fact that we're not going with lesser literature. We're going to go with literature that stretches our partners, because that's the entire objective. We want them to get better as a player. And if we stay right where they're comfortable, they're never going to get better.
Going back to your beginnings there, you grew up in Gordo, between Tuscaloosa and the Mississippi state line, and I remember driving through Gordo once, and I think I passed it before I realized I'd driven through it. But how did you become interested in music at Gordo? What was the band program like there?
Well, it all goes back to your teachers, and fortunately for us, we came through Gordo High School and we had a teacher that was just a phenomenal musician and cared about us kids and was willing to do whatever he needed to do, he and his wife, to have a band program. Prior to his getting to Gordo, the band program wasn't very big at all. It wasn't very good at all. And by the time he'd been there, I'd say probably 7 years, he had developed a group that was 16 members when he got there to a group of 96. And that's in a high school that probably 7th grade through 12 now is 220 kids. So almost half of the school was in the band. And back then, in particular in Gordo, you either played football or you were a cheerleader or you were in the band. But he was a huge inspiration, and I speak with him on a regular basis to this day. And that's what, I saw what he did, and I saw how much he enjoyed what he did, and I thought, that's something I would like to do someday.
Yeah, and when was that? About when in your high school or middle school career did you start thinking in that direction?
Well, I guess probably 9th grade for me, because we started band at Gordo in 5th grade. And if you progressed far enough, when you were in 6th grade, you actually got to go and play with the big band. So it was a huge age difference in that band, but it was a wonderful band. I think the last year that he was there, we did one of the pieces we're doing this year, the Tchaikovsky finale. We did Rienzi. We were like a Class C school, but we're doing AA literature like we talked about before. I'm playing it very well. And here's the thing, he never told us anything other than, you guys can do this. He never said you can't do it, so we just assumed we were supposed to do it. Whatever he asked us to do, we were willing to do. He was just a huge influence in my life.
So your decision in high school to pick a college to go to, how did you do that? How did you decide to go to Alabama? What was the motivating factor to go to that?
Coach Bryant. Yeah, he can't beat that. He had come to university in 58, I believe it was, 57 or 58. And I was just a little child in grammar school. And that's, being 20 miles from Tuscaloosa, that's all you ever heard was about Coach Bryant and the Crimson Tide. And as far as I was concerned, that was the only place I wanted to go to school. It was a matter of getting in there was the issue. So, it was a no-brainer for me.
It has a very big music school. Was it that size then at Alabama, the music school? How developed was it at that point?
It was a different animal back then. You had, you didn't have the different, as many different divisions and opportunities back then. You had Colonel Butler, who was the band director, and you had Yale Ellis, who was the assistant band director. And that pretty much essentially was, the instrumental music department. They had a couple of woodwind professors along the way, but it was a lot different than what you see today.
So from day one, were you a music major at Alabama?
Yeah, yes, I was.
And let's talk some about, one of the showpieces of Alabama that, everybody knows like Coach Bryant, is the $1 Million Band. And you were a student director of the band. Tell us about that, how you came to do that, and your impression of the band.
Okay, well, it was a pretty simple process. Those of us that were music ed majors, every year, Dr. Ferguson, who was a band director at that time, would pick several of us to be student conductors and student directors. And our responsibilities primarily were pep rallies and things of that nature. And what that meant was, he probably picked 4 of us and divide the band into 4 different pep bands to do pep rallies. And it was a big deal for me. First of all, his confidence in me to let me do that was overwhelming. I can't thank him enough for that opportunity. And fortunately for me, what sticks out in my mind, I actually got to be the guy that did the pep band at homecoming one year, and I got to stand next to Coach Bryant. Mm-hmm. And that's always been just primo in my mind. That was really one of the coolest things I've ever done. So that's how that happened.
How about any wild stories with the band? I mean, was it has the statute of limitations run out on anything you could tell? I mean,
well, I've got to share one, and the kids will enjoy this because we preach all the time. You need to be where you're supposed to be when you're supposed to be, that kind of thing. 72 Iron Bowl. That was the famous 17-16 game, right? Mm-hmm. Well, we had a ritual where when we played in Birmingham at Legion Field, we had some kids that lived in the Birmingham area that would we'd load the buses for us that were in Tuscaloosa and come up to Western Hills Mall over in Fairfield. Mm-hmm. The kids that lived here in Birmingham would be here in town, and they would come over and meet us at Western Hills. We'd all get on the bus and ride into Legion Field together. Well, we get to Legion Field, of course, 10 minutes left to go in the game, and we're up, 16-0. Mm-hmm. And then, I think Auburn drives and kicks a field goal, 16-3. And we get the ball, drive it, stall, and we go to punt. David Langner grabs one of the other guys, blocked the ball. David Langner grabbed it, ran in. All right, well, we were feeling sick already, right? Mm-hmm. So next time that we have the ball, we get to a certain point, we stall out there, we do the same thing again. Greg Gant, our punter, punts. It's blocked again, same guy, David Langner, runs it in. So it ends up being 17-16. So I'm distraught already, right? We get on our buses, we head back to Western Hills Mall. We're sitting on the bus, let the kids that live in Birmingham get off, do their thing. I looked at my friend, I said, you know what? I'd like something to drink. And she said, that's a good idea. Why don't you get us something? There was a Pizzitz bake shop right there. I said, okay, I'll hop on. I said, now, whatever you do, don't let the buses leave without me. She goes, I got it, no problem. So when we got something to drink, got back on the bus. She said, you know what, I'd like a donut. I said, never mind, I got it. I said, now, don't let them. She said, I've got it handled. So I went in and got donuts. I had to wait a little while at the bake shop, got donuts. I walked back out of Western Hills Mall and down the Bessemer Superhighway. I see 7 chartered buses going down the highway. Right? I was left stranded at Western Hills Mall, had no money. I knew no one in Birmingham. I just sat down on the curb. I didn't know what to do at all. And sat there and began to soak it all in. I kept thinking, how am I going to get back to Tuscaloosa? This could be a pretty serious thing. And I thought for a while I was probably going to have to sleep right there on the curb at Western Hills Mall. Now, just when everything has gotten to the point, I don't know what I'm going to do, these 2 freshmen come walking out of the mall. And I knew they were from Fort Walton Beach, Florida. And I said, Bruce, are y'all going back to Tuscaloosa? He goes, yeah. And they kept walking. I said, would it be possible for me to catch a ride with you back to Tuscaloosa? And he looked at his friend, and the friend goes, I don't think so. And then he looked at him, he said, yeah, we'll give you a ride back. So, end of the story. When I get back to Tuscaloosa, I find Dr. Ferguson. I said, you left me in Birmingham. His response, he laughed. So yes, that's a very memorable story. I could still be the best for Western Hills Mall to this day.
That would have changed life right there. It would have. Well, so with graduation approaches at Alabama, do you know where you want to go? Do you got plans for teaching? Where are you there?
No, I just know that I'm gonna try real hard to get a job, but I didn't have one lined up. And that's a real kind of pivotal time there when out of school, you're unemployed, you're just trying to figure out what you're going to do. So I was just kind of relying on God to provide.
And applications are different then than now. I mean, there's no internet to look up jobs available. How did you search out something?
Well, fortunately for me, my first trip when I graduated was to Greenville, Mississippi to visit my cousin, who was teaching at Pelham Junior High over there in Greenville. It turns out he had been talking to the director at Mountain Brook High School about possibly coming and being the junior high director at Mountain Brook. While we were out there, he got a phone call from this guy, and he said, "Oh, I know that's Whitman." He said, "I don't want to answer the phone because I don't want the job." And I said, "Do you mind if I talk to him?" He said, "No, be my guest." So I did, and as they say, the rest is history.
How long were you at Mountain Brook?
I was at the junior high 5 years and the high school 8.
So that was
13.
Yeah. And from the high school, tell me about the transition. Then it was to Pelham, right?
It was. That was a job that opened. Pelham opened in the middle of the year. I went in there in February. And it was I actually kind of come to know of that job through a couple of my friends that taught in Shelby County. David Dixon, who was at Shelby County High School, had been after me for years to come to Shelby County to teach. And I kept telling him there's no job, and then eventually there is a job. I get a phone call from another guy that's teaching at Thompson High School, and he said, "I understand you're interested in Pelham High School." And I said, "Well, when a job comes open, I might be." He said, "Well, it just came open this afternoon." And he said, "Here's the principal's name. You need to call him and talk to him." And we did. We set up the interview, and that's how that came about.
So Pelham was set up a lot like Oak Mountain, where you had this like two bands there, and
we did. Eventually, we did. When we started, we didn't because the numbers were small, and that community has just exploded, and so did the population of the school. It was built originally for about 800 kids, just sitting up there on that hill, and how many times they've expanded that facility, and they're under expansion right now. But nobody had any idea way down in Shelby County that school would grow like that. The population would move that way. But yeah, we eventually ended up with a couple of concert bands, jazz ensemble, pretty good sized marching band. It was quite a good situation.
Well, when Oak Mountain started to be built, I guess there must have been meetings or something, because I've heard talk of the boosters about how they had worked with the principal, or the incoming principal, Mr. Fuller, about getting an outstanding band director. How did this all come about, the transition from Pelham to Oak Mountain?
Well, the thing about when Sharon and I moved into our house back in '81, our desire and prayer had been from day one that there would be a school close that I could teach, and that's what we've been looking for. And I guess after the Pelham experiment turned out so well, when they started talking about building this school, it just seemed to be a logical fit, and it was something that I wanted to do. It's an opportunity, to start a program from scratch, put everything in place that's in place, and then just watch it grow. So yes, I was very interested in what was going on here. From what I understand, there were parents jockeying for me that I had no idea they were doing it. Mm-hmm. But that's how we got into this situation here.
Well, I know there are parents now who recently have been or are band boosters that you taught in previous years that wanted their kids to be taught by you as well. Has that happened much, where you've had students specifically move to this school district to become part of the band program?
We draw a lot of kids that want to be, kids that see us and they want to be part of what we're doing here. But that's been a really neat thing to have. Children of kids that I taught when I was in this case, most all of those were from Mountain Brook, and they moved out here, and they were very adamant they wanted their kids in our program, which made me feel real good. Mm-hmm. Something we're really proud of.
Well, have the schools, band programs in particular, but the schools and students changed much over those years? I mean, you spanned a lot of years with a number of different schools. Have attitudes changed? What's it like now compared to when you started?
You know, I think kids are kids. I think the big difference nowadays is the access that we have to things that we used to we couldn't or we didn't have in the past. Like, you know, when I was at Mountain Brook or Pelham, if we wanted to hear a recording of something, we had to go out and buy it. You know, now you can either download it on iTunes, or you can go to YouTube and find wonderful performances. But you know, like I said, I think kids are kids, and I think they're about the same. I've always found that if you expect a lot out of them, you get a lot out of them. If you don't expect much, you're not going to get much. So I think they're about the same, except they're maybe a little smarter nowadays.
Well, I mean, I would guess that over the years there have been other rumors that, you know, you might retire. Because I remember one concert where you were standing there and you turned around and you said something about rumors of my retirement. You said, you know, unlike Joe Paterno, I haven't even had a knee replacement yet, so I'm too young to retire. So why was this year different? Why did you decide that, you know, this was the time for you?
Well, you know, everyone, Cliff, says that you know when it's time. You know, and I think that's very true. I always thought that was just a bunch of hooey, but I think that's really true for me in my life and where I am right now. It's the thing for me to do. There are going to be plenty of opportunities for me to continue to teach, which is what I love doing. You know, the two things I'm passionate about is kids and music, and making sure that I'm still involved. I'm going to have plenty of opportunities to do that, but it just felt like to me now was the time to do that. There are a lot of things that Sharon and I haven't had an opportunity to do all these years, and we don't say that begrudgingly. We just know that there are some things that we'd like to do. We like to travel some. We like to see some things and do some other things, because it's always for us, just like anybody else, been go to work, come home, go to work, come home, that kind of thing. And it seemed like just a great opportunity, almost a perfect time for me to kind of move aside and let some younger people come in. That really are just raring to go and take this program. And just, you know, to me it'll be very, very interesting and fun to watch, see where it ends up.
Well, that's kind of a message in and of itself, but in closing, is there any message that you want to make sure that parents get, or staff gets, or students get, that you think would be important?
Well, like I said earlier, I think the important thing is to love what you do, you know. And I've said many, many times, you know, you've heard the old corny thing about if you pick something to do for a living that you like, you never work a day in your life. That's kind of been it with me. I love kids, I love being around, always have, and I love music. And to see them achieve and see those two elements, you know, intertwine, and the product that we get from that, it's just, I can't think of a better way to have spent the last 39 years, quite honestly.
Well, I've seen, you know, boosters over the years here and how great they have been to this program and supporting you and all you and the staff have done here, and it's just pretty amazing. And you know, I've enjoyed watching it. Thanks for this time.
Thank you.
All right.